and welcome to the Creation Kit scripting series Papyrus tutorials. This episode, this is the third part of the events and functions section, and we're going to talk about function and event parameters slash arguments. So what are arguments and parameters? They are variables that are required for the event or function to execute. For example, in this function, you might recognize it from the previous episode, add health with float current health and float add value. Current health and add value are the arguments or parameters for that. So you need to give it a float value such as 2.0 or something like that in order for both spots in order to execute that function. Now let's look at the onTrigger enter event in our second example, and it requires the AK action ref, which is an object reference. It's the object that entered the trigger, and that's an argument for that event. So in addition to being required for the function, they also are created as temporary variables during the duration of the function and event call. So if you had an on-death event on, say, the Hell Skeever that we've been playing around with, the killer would be whoever killed the Skeever at that time. So if Dremora Lord got the final blow, well, it would be the killing actor, and so on and so forth. Touching back to our variable scope video, if you haven't seen that, might be a decent idea. The lifespan of the variables, the arguments and parameters, are only for that specific event and function call. So if you want to use the information for that given call later, you want to store it in a property or a global variable if it's going to be used like by quests and things like that. So why use parameters and functions if they're so limited in scope? Bethesda created functions that require them, so in those cases you want to give them what they need in order to work, like move to, damage actor value, add or mod actor value, so on and so forth. Because parameters and arguments are temporary, it'll save on your game memory using arguments when you can, instead of, let's say, a property. And whenever you have complex operations, adding multiple values, if you're doing a long complex formula, you might want to give it the parameters, and then it will do the calculation in the formula. It gives you a lot of room for expansion and creativity using parameters and functions, because you can give them whatever value you need in order to perform what operation you want on actors, objects, and so on and so forth. So let's play around with function parameters now that we've talked a little bit about them. Okay, so we have our Skeever again, and we have this script, function parameters. We have the Skeever, the player, which we'll assign in the script, and then we have a death counter. So let's go to our script. I've commented this time our properties just so we have an idea what they are. The player, obviously, the event's basic creatures, the Hell Skeever, and then the death counter. We're going to be keeping track of how many times the Hell Skeever has died. So our event on a net, it's going to be like how we've been doing it, and our update game time, this function right here, the Hell Skeever breaks loose, is going to be changed. So death count is what we're going to have as the parameter for this function now. So instead of just simply reviving the creature, we are going to do a check count is, let's say, greater than 1, because it will be 2 in that case. Or I should say less than 2, excuse me. We'll want to revive the creature. We're using nested ifs, by the way. I didn't cover that in the variable comparisons. Basically, your first check here is seeing, oh hey, is it dead? And now, in this case, we're checking to see how many times this hell skeever has been revived. Let's do 3, just so since death count is going to be 0 initially, we'll want to pass death counter here, and we want to print out the death count. Actually, we're going to do that next step. Increment death count. So we're going to do plus equals 1 to increment our death count. Now assign death counter the new value. And before we do this, we're going to make a new function, because if another script wants to access the death count, we can do that. So inputs, new death count value. The purpose of this function is to set death counter. So, function set death counter. We want to do an int and new val to designate our new value. And we want death counter to equal new val. And that's the entire purpose of that function. For good form, we would do a get function, but for the purposes of this, we are not going to do that. So, you're going to call set death counter, and we're going to use death count there. And now we want to do the step of printing the death counter. So debug dot message box value of death counter is, and then we're going to add death counter to the mix. And we're going to make this message a little bit better. And that should do it. Oh. We do, however, want to move this logic here within our if, because we're not going to resurrect the creature any more times after that. And that's how our logic changes for the Hellskeever breaks loose. We're going to increment our death counter so we can keep track of how many times we revive it. We are going to resurrect the Hellskeever. We are going to move it, and then we're going to re-register for the update game time. So, let's see if the creation kit complains at us for what we've done. And it has not. So, let's save this, and I will see you once the game loads. Alright, we are loading the game, and we should start seeing some of the effects pretty soon. Okay. Oh, that's right. We won't see it until we deal with the Hellskeever. So we're going to wait around for the Hellskeever again. Like we have in the previous videos, if you're joining us for the first time, there's a little bit of a wait. Spawn pretty soon, the 0.3 time interval. The reason why we didn't use any events with parameters in this episode was without utilizing multiple scripts, I couldn't show that effectively. And the concepts of function and event parameters translate easily between each other. Okay. I think there is a logic error here, because the skeever is not spawning right now. Our death counter might be bugged out on the initial portion, or it's not setting properly. So we will deal with that. Alright, we are going to go back to the code real quick because apparently it failed, and we're going to assign the death counter. So death counter is going to equal 0 just to cover that base. We pass death counter into this function directly. Let's make a temporary variable just to eliminate that as a cause of concern. Cur death count. Let's go here and let's assign that death counter, and let's go cur death count there, and let's go down to the meat and bones of what we're doing. Another problem with what we just did, we didn't handle the base case. The code probably would have worked without what I'm doing right now, but it doesn't matter. Let's make the changes and then go on with it. So temp var for death count. Because of the scope of variables, I'm going to reuse cur death count again. Death count, and then we're going to go down here, change that, and let's go here. And then else, and we're going to move this code here, copy it, paste it here, so we can get the initial encounter. And this is going to be what we call the base case encounter before the Hellskeever dies for the first time. Okay. And that should be it. And we will go back into game and test it out to make sure it works. Alright, we are going to try this again. This time it should work, because we eliminated the chance of the variable assignments failing, and we eliminated the logic error on the base case of the skeever spawning for the first time near you. So, I'm going to get the spells out again. Sorry, spending some time there. As your scripts get more complex, you will have to do a lot more troubleshooting like that. And the more checks that you have for variables, the more likely it will be that you will have to do logic checks to make sure, A, am I checking for the right thing? B, are there any other cases I'm not thinking about for this variable? And, alright, here we go. We killed the Hellskeever for the first time. Due to when we do the check for the death count, we didn't get a message for, oh hey, the Skeever just died. If we had a script running on the Hellskeever itself, however, we would have used an on-death event, and it would have posted the message then, but due to the design decision here, it's not going to post until a little bit later in the logic. Alright, we just got an updated. I guess the value hasn't updated yet. Death count. Or I'm printing the wrong value, probably. Alright. And the Hellskeever is dead again. So let's see if the value updates correctly. If not, it'll just be a simple error. But you'll get the idea of the checks it's going through. Okay, yeah, I have an error there. So yeah, that's functions with parameters. You can use these for a lot more complex things, not just keeping track of the death count. Do a quick look on the script before we get to the very end of the video. Let's see. Yep, we're keeping track of death counter. Although death counter is not getting the right value because of this right here. We're not going to test it again because now, because of that, this should work properly. And instead of seeing 0 over and over, you'll see 1, 2, and 3 won't show up because it fails the check. And the function will end without registering again. So let's go back to the end of the video. And that's it for function parameters. Sorry for being a little confusing. There were some errors during the live coding section, and we worked through them logically. If you have questions about this because it was a little convoluted there, message me. I might do a second part if I get requests there for that. Uh, Again, for those that have seen videos in the past, I'm going to have the forum profile and Nexus profile itself in the comments section. Messaging on YouTube will also work. If you're new to the videos, well, all of this information will be in the YouTube description. Feel free to contact me with questions about scripts, any of the past videos that I've done, or this video if you're the first time here. Also, any special script requests, topics, message me for them. And if you just have questions in general, feel free. And I hope to see everybody on the next episode.